The phone screen glowed in the darkness of the tiny apartment, illuminating her tear-stained face as she stared at the message she had just sent. I need $85 for baby formula. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I'm sorry. Her hand shook as she waited for a reply. The baby's cries echoed from the other room. She had exactly $2.17 in her bank account, no food in the refrigerator, and a baby who hadn't stopped crying for hours. What she didn't know was that the number she thought belonged to her brother now belonged to someone else, someone whose net worth had 9 zeros at the end. She had no idea that this desperate text message, sent at 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday, would change her life forever. Faith looked at her phone again, wondering why her brother hadn't replied. It had been 3 years since they had spoken, 3 years of silence after their big fight about her ex. But surely he wouldn't ignore her when his niece was involved. She had swallowed her pride to reach out, telling herself this was just a test to see if he still cared, if there was any hope of fixing their relationship. She hadn't expected to actually need the money by the time he responded. The baby's cries had grown louder. Faith rushed to the small bassinet in the corner of her one-bedroom apartment. Little Lily was only 3 months old. Her face was red from crying, her tiny hands balled into fists. "I know, baby girl," Faith whispered, picking her up and rocking her gently. "Mommy's trying to figure something out." The apartment was cold despite it being April. The heating had been turned off last month when she couldn't pay the bill. Faith wrapped Lily in another blanket, trying to calm her. The baby's formula had run out that morning, and Faith had been giving her water with a tiny bit of sugar, something her grandmother used to do in emergencies, but that wasn't going to work for much longer. Her phone buzzed. The sound made her heart jump. She grabbed it quickly, hoping it was her brother. "Wrong number," the text read. Faith's heart sank. She had memorized her brother's number years ago. Had he changed it to avoid her completely? She typed back quickly. "James, it's Faith. Please, I really need help. Lily needs formula." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. "This isn't James. You have a wrong number." Tears welled up in Faith's eyes. She had been so sure this was his number. Now she had no way to reach her brother, and she had just embarrassed herself to a stranger. "I'm sorry to bother you," she typed back, her fingers trembling. She put the phone down and leaned against the wall, sliding to the floor with Lily in her arms. The baby had quieted a little, exhausted from crying, but Faith knew she would start again soon. She needed to figure something out. The phone buzzed again. Faith ignored it at first, thinking the stranger was just acknowledging her apology. But when it buzzed a second time, she reached for it. "Is your baby really out of formula?" the message read. Faith stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. She didn't want charity from a stranger, but Lily's needs came first. "Yes," she finally typed back, "but that's not your problem. I'll figure it out." The response came quickly. "What kind does she need?" Faith hesitated. Who is this person? Why would they care about a stranger's baby? But desperation won out. "Enfamil. But really, it's okay. I'm sorry to have bothered you. There's a 24-hour Walmart on Evergreen Drive. I can have formula delivered to you through their pickup service in an hour. What's your name?" Faith stared at the message in disbelief. Was this some kind of joke, or worse, some kind of trap? Why would you do that for someone you don't know? The reply came as she was leaving the store. "Because a baby shouldn't go hungry." Faith bit her lip. She had learned the hard way not to trust easily. Her ex had taught her that lesson through painful experience. But what choice did she have? "My name is Faith Williams," she responded after a long pause. "Order will be ready in an hour. Show your ID at pickup." Faith stared at the message, unable to believe what was happening. Who was this person? Her phone buzzed again, and "Faith, if you need help, ask for it directly. Don't test people. Life's too short for games." The message hit her hard. The stranger had seen right through her excuse about testing her brother. She felt ashamed, but also slightly defensive. She had been burned so many times that trust didn't come easily anymore. "Thank you," she typed, not knowing what else to say. An hour later, Faith stood at the Walmart pickup counter. Lily was strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier. When she gave her name, the employee handed her not just 1, but 6 large cans of formula. "There must be some mistake," Faith said, looking at the mountain of formula cans. The employee checked her screen. No mistake. Order for Faith Williams. Paid for by… It just says wrong number. Faith felt a lump in her throat as she stared at the formula that would feed Lily for at least a month. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the mysterious stranger. Thank you so much. This means more than you know. I wish I could repay you someday. The reply came as she was leaving the store. Take care of your daughter. That's repayment enough. Faith walked home under the streetlights, her heart a little lighter despite the weight of the formula in her bags. She still didn't know who her mysterious benefactor was, but for the first time in months, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might get better. What she didn't know was that in a penthouse 30 miles away, a man was staring at his phone, thinking about a woman named Faith and her baby, wondering why her message had affected him so deeply. He was already making plans to learn more about her. Thomas Blackwood sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the city lights that sparkled like fallen stars across the landscape. At 42, he had everything money could buy, yet the emptiness inside him seemed to grow with each passing year. His phone sat on the desk, the exchange with the woman named Faith still open on the screen. He hadn't meant to get involved when the text came through at 2:13 a.m. He had been working as usual. Sleep didn't come easily these days. He had almost ignored it, assuming it was a wrong number, but something about the desperation in those simple words had caught his attention. I need $85 for baby formula. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I am sorry. He had almost replied with a simple wrong number and gone back to work, but then he thought about the baby, a hungry baby. He couldn't just ignore that. Thomas picked up his phone again and scrolled through the brief conversation. There was something about this Faith woman that intrigued him. The pride in her messages, even when asking for help, the reluctance to accept charity. He respected that. His assistant, Eleanor, knocked on the door frame. Sir, you have a meeting in 20 minutes with the board, she said. Thomas nodded, still looking at his phone. Eleanor, I need you to find information on a Faith Williams. She lives somewhere in the city, has a baby girl named Lily, about 3 months old. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question him. I'll see what I can find, sir. And Eleanor, be discreet. I don't want her to know I'm looking into her background. Of course, sir, Eleanor said before leaving, closing the door behind her. Thomas put down his phone and turned back to his computer. The board meeting would be about the new hospital wing his company was funding. Normally, he would be focused entirely on the project, but today his mind kept drifting to the woman and her baby. Why had her message affected him so deeply? Perhaps it was because it reminded him of his own childhood. His mother had struggled to make ends meet after his father abandoned them. There had been nights when they'd gone hungry. If not for the kindness of strangers and his mother's determination, he might never have made out of poverty. By the time Eleanor returned with a file later that afternoon, Thomas had convinced himself that his interest was purely humanitarian. He was in a position to help people, and this was just another opportunity to do so. Faith Williams, 27 years old. Single mother to Lily Williams, 3 months old. Lives in an apartment on the east side. Works as a nursing assistant at Memorial Hospital, but has been on unpaid leave since giving birth. Father of the baby is not in the picture. She has a brother, James Williams, but they appear to be estranged. Thomas flipped through the file, looking at the information Eleanor had gathered. Faith's apartment was in one of the poorest areas of the city. Her bank account was nearly empty. She had medical debt from the birth, despite having insurance. Her job wouldn't be waiting for her when her leave ended. The hospital was downsizing. She's going to need more than baby formula, Thomas murmured. Eleanor stood by the desk, her expression neutral. Would you like me to arrange something, sir? Thomas closed the file. Not yet. I need to think about this. After Eleanor left, Thomas leaned back in his chair, considering his options. He could anonymously pay off Faith's medical debt. He could ensure she had a job to return to. He could even arrange for childcare so she could work. But something told him Faith wouldn't accept such help if she knew where it was coming from. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Faith. I don't know who you are, but thank you again for the formula. Lily is finally sleeping peacefully. I promise I'm not usually someone who begs strangers for help. Things have just been really hard lately. Thomas looked at the message for a long time before replying. Everyone needs help sometimes. I'm glad your daughter is doing better. He hesitated, then added, my name is Thomas, by the way. He hit send before he could change his mind. Why had he told her his name? He usually valued his privacy above all else. The reply came quickly. Nice to meet you, Thomas. Though I wish it had been under better circumstances. I feel like I should explain myself. I really was trying to text my brother. We haven't spoken in years, but I thought maybe for Lily's sake. Anyway, I was wrong about a lot of things. Thomas found himself smiling at her honesty. Family relationships can be complicated, he responded. Do you have other people you can reach out to for support? There was a longer pause before her next message. Not really. My mom died when I was in college, and my dad left when I was a kid. I have some friends, but everyone's struggling these days. I don't like to burden them. Thomas frowned. Her situation was worse than he'd thought. What about Lily's father? He asked, even though Eleanor's report had already told him the man wasn't involved. The three dots appeared and disappeared several times before Faith's answer came through. He left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. Block my number. Thomas felt a surge of anger at this unknown man who had abandoned his responsibilities so easily. His loss, he typed. Lily sounds like a wonderful baby. She is, Faith replied. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, even on the hardest days. Thomas found himself wanting to know more about this woman who faced such difficulties, yet still had such love and optimism. If you don't mind me asking, what happened with your brother, the one you were trying to contact? Another long pause. We had a big fight 3 years ago. He warned me about my ex, Lily's father. Said he was bad news. I didn't listen. When everything fell apart, I was too ashamed to admit James was right. And now, I don't even have his correct number. Would you like to find him for me? Thomas thought for a moment. He had resources that could locate James Williams within hours. But offering such help might seem suspicious. Let me think about this, he wrote. There might be ways to find him without hiring a professional. You've already done more than enough. Faith replied, I can't ask for anything else. You've already done so much. You're not asking, Thomas wrote back. I'm offering. Everyone deserves to have family in their life, especially Lily. There was no immediate response. Thomas wondered if he had overstepped. After all, they were still strangers connected by a wrong number in an act of kindness. Finally, a new message appeared. Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me. It was a fair question, and one Thomas had been asking himself. Maybe I see something of myself in your situation, he replied honestly. My mother raised me alone, and there were times when a little kindness from a stranger made all the difference. You turned out okay, I'm guessing. Faith responded. Thomas looked around his penthouse office at the trappings of wealth that surrounded him. I've been fortunate, he wrote. The understatement almost made him smile. But I never forget where I came from. Well, thank you for remembering, Faith wrote. I should go. Lily is starting to wake up, but I can text you again sometime. It's nice having someone to talk to. Thomas felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. Anytime, he replied. I'm glad your daughter is doing better. He put his phone down and turned to the window again. The city looked different somehow, as if he was seeing it through new eyes. For years, he had poured himself into building his company, increasing his wealth, funding charitable projects. But it had been a long time since he had connected with someone on a personal level. A text message sent to a wrong number had somehow broken through the walls he had built around himself. And for the first time in years, Thomas Blackwood was curious about where this unexpected connection might lead. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Faith's apartment, casting a soft glow over Lily's sleeping face. Faith watched her daughter breathe, tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, and felt the familiar mixture of love and anxiety that had become her constant companion since becoming a mother. The formula Thomas had provided was a godsend, but it was just one of many needs. The rent was due in a week, and she was already 2 months behind. The landlord had been patient so far, but his patience was running out. The electricity bill was overdue, and her cell phone would be disconnected if she didn't make at least a partial payment soon. Faith gently stroked Lily's cheek, then carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake her. These quiet morning moments were precious, a chance to figure out a plan before the day's challenges began. She opened her laptop, wincing at the cracked screen, another casualty of her financial situation. The job listings hadn't changed since yesterday. Everyone wanted experience she didn't have, or availability she couldn't offer as a single mother. Her nursing assistant certification would expire soon if she didn't find work in the field, but without reliable childcare, even that door was closing. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly grabbed it before the sound could wake Lily. It was a text from Thomas. "Good morning. Just checking in. How are you and Lily today?" Faith smiled despite herself. In the 3 days since their first interaction, Thomas had texted every morning with the same simple check-in. She still knew almost nothing about him, except that he had been raised by a single mother and was clearly financially comfortable enough to buy 6 cans of baby formula without hesitation. "We're okay," she typed back. "Lily slept for 4 hours straight last night, which feels like a miracle." "That's progress," Thomas replied. "And how are you doing, really?" Faith hesitated. She had never been good at admitting when she was struggling, preferring to put on a brave face. But something about Thomas's direct questions made it hard to hide. "Worried about rent," she admitted. "I'm looking for work, but it's complicated with a baby." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "What kind of work are you looking for?" Thomas asked. "Anything that pays the bills," Faith replied honestly. "I'm a certified nursing assistant, but I take anything right now." "Have you considered remote work?" Thomas asked. "Something you could do from home with Lily?" Faith sighed. "I've looked into it. Most legitimate remote jobs still require specific hours or experience I don't have, and I'm wary of scams." "That's understandable," Thomas responded. "Let me think about this." Faith put her phone down and went to the small kitchen area to make coffee. She had exactly 3 scoops of coffee left in the container. Enough for today, but not tomorrow. One more thing to worry about. Lily began to stir, her little face scrunching up as she woke. Faith quickly prepared a bottle of formula and picked her up, settling into the one comfortable chair in the apartment to feed her. "What are we going to do, Lily Bug?" she whispered to her daughter. "Your mom is trying her best, but it doesn't seem to be enough." Her phone buzzed again, but she couldn't reach it while feeding Lily. By the time she had burped the baby and settled her on a blanket on the floor, there were 3 new messages from Thomas. "I might have an opportunity for you." The first one read, "A friend of mine runs a medical transcription company. They're looking for people who understand medical terminology. With your background as a CNA, you might be a good fit." The third message made Faith's heart beat faster. "It's legitimate, remote, and you can set your own hours. Would you be interested in learning more?" Faith stared at the phone, trying to process what she was reading. It sounded too good to be true, which usually meant it was. But Thomas had already proven himself trustworthy once. "I'd definitely be interested," she replied. "But I have to ask, why are you doing this? You don't even know me." The reply came quickly. "Sometimes people come into our lives for a reason. Maybe you texted the wrong number, but perhaps it was the right person at the right time." Faith smiled at the unexpected philosophical turn. "That's a nice thought. So how do I apply for this job?" "I'll have my friend contact you directly. Is it okay if I give her your number?" Thomas asked. Faith hesitated only briefly before responding. "Yes, that's fine." She put down her phone and looked at Lily, who was kicking her legs and making happy baby noises on her blanket. "Did you hear that, Lily? Mama might have a job opportunity. A real one from home." As if in response, Lily gave a toothless smile that melted Faith's heart. These moments made all the struggle worthwhile. Her phone rang with an unknown number. Faith quickly answered it. "Hello, is this Faith Williams?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "Yes, speaking," Faith managed to say, her mind still processing this new information. "Hi, my name is Maria Johnson. I'm the founder of MedScript Transcription Services. Thomas Blackwood mentioned you might be interested in a position with us." Faith's mind raced. Thomas Blackwood, as in Blackwood Industries, the company that owned half the buildings downtown? Yes, I am interested," Faith said, her mind still processing this new information. "Excellent. Thomas spoke highly of your background in healthcare. Do you have time for a quick interview now, or would you prefer to schedule something later?" Maria asked. Faith looked around her messy apartment at Lily on the floor, at the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. "Now is fine," she said firmly. The interview went better than Faith had expected. Maria was professional but kind, asking about Faith's experience as a CNA, her familiarity with medical terminology, and her typing speed. She explained that new transcriptionists started with simpler files and progressed to more complex ones as they gained experience. The pay was per audio minute transcribed, with bonuses for accuracy and quick turnaround. "We can provide the necessary software and training," Maria explained. "The only requirements are a computer with internet access, a quiet space to work, and a commitment to confidentiality. I can definitely provide all of those," Faith assured her. Silently, she thanked her past self for splurging on a laptop before Lily was born. "There is one more thing," Maria said, her tone becoming slightly hesitant. "Thomas mentioned that you have a young baby and might need some flexibility." Faith braced herself for bad news. This was usually where opportunities fell apart. "We actually have a special program for parents of young children," Maria continued. "Extended deadlines, mentorship from other parent transcriptionists, and access to our emergency backup team if you're unable to complete a file due to child-related issues." Faith was speechless for a moment. "That sounds amazing," she finally said. "We find that parents are often our most dedicated and accurate transcriptionists," Maria said warmly. "So, it's a win-win. Can you start training tomorrow?" Maria asked. "Absolutely," Faith said, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. After the call ended, Faith picked up Lily and danced around the small apartment with her. "We did it, baby girl. Mama's got a job. I start training tomorrow." She grabbed her phone and texted Thomas. "Just finished the interview with Maria. I got the job. I start training tomorrow. Thank you so much, Thomas." His reply came a few minutes later. "I'm glad. Maria's good people. She'll take care of you." Faith put her phone down and looked around her small apartment with new eyes. For the first time in months, the walls didn't feel like they were closing in on her. She had a job, formula for Lily, and maybe just maybe a new friend in Thomas Blackwood, the billionaire she had texted by accident. What Faith didn't know was that across town, Thomas was staring at his phone, smiling at her messages, and wondering why helping this particular woman and her baby felt so much more satisfying than any of the major charitable projects his company had funded over the years. 3 weeks had passed since Faith began working for MedScript transcription. The training had been challenging but manageable, and she was now handling simple medical notes and reports. The flexible schedule allowed her to work during Lily's naps and late at night. Thomas had continued to text her almost daily, simple check-ins that gradually evolved into real conversations. She learned that he was 42, had never been married, and worked in business. An understatement that made her laugh when she called him on it. He asked about Lily's development and listened when Faith shared her worries about being a good mother. Despite their vastly different circumstances, talking to him felt easy and natural. But one subject remained unresolved: her brother, James. Thomas had mentioned several times that he might be able to help find him, but Faith had been hesitant to accept more help. Today, though, as Lily turned 4 months old, Faith found herself thinking about family and what it meant. She picked up her phone. "Remember when you offered to help me find my brother?" she texted Thomas. "Is that offer still open?" His response came quickly. "Of course. Tell me what you know about him, and I'll see what I can do." Faith settled onto her couch with Lily on her lap and began typing. "His full name is James Robert Williams. He's 2 years older than me, so 29 now. Last time I knew, he was working as an electrician in the city. He has a birthmark shaped like Australia on his left shoulder. That's a random detail, but it's distinctive. Our last fight was about 3 years ago when I was dating Marcus, Lily's father. James said Marcus was trouble, and I told him to stay out of my business." She paused, the memory still painful. "The last words I said to him were that I didn't need his approval or his protection. I said some other things too, terrible things. I didn't mean them. He walked away, and we haven't spoken since. I tried calling a few times after Marcus left, but his number had changed. That's why I thought I had his new number when I texted you." Thomas's reply was gentle. Family wounds run deep, but they can heal with time and effort. "Let me see what I can find." Faith put her phone down and looked at Lily, who was watching her with curious eyes. "That's your Uncle James I'm trying to find," she told her daughter softly. "He doesn't know about you yet, but I think he'd love you a lot." Her phone buzzed again. "I have some resources that might help," Thomas had written. "But I need to ask, have you tried social media?" Many people who aren't on the major platforms still have LinkedIn for professional connections. Faith smiled wryly. "I checked LinkedIn. There are about 50 James Williams in the city. None of them look like my brother in their profile pictures, but many don't have photos at all. What about mutual friends?" Thomas suggested. "I've tried reaching out to a few, but most of them lost touch with him too." James was always kind of a loner. There was a longer pause before Thomas's next message. "Would you be comfortable if I hired someone to look for him? I know people who can do this discreetly and ethically." Faith bit her lip. It felt like a big step to accept this level of help from Thomas, but finding James was important, not just for her, but for Lily too. "Yes," she finally replied. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," came the quick response. "I'll keep you updated." Faith put her phone down, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. What if James didn't want to be found? What if he was still angry with her? What if he had moved away, started a new life, and had no interest in reconnecting with his sister or meeting his niece? She pushed those thoughts aside and focused on Lily, who was starting to fuss. It was time for her afternoon bottle, and Faith had transcription work to complete before bedtime. Her life had developed a routine, not an easy one, but one that was sustainable. And having Thomas's support, even from a distance, made her feel less alone. 2 days later, Faith was feeding Lily breakfast when her phone chimed with a text from Thomas. "Good news. My contact found information on your brother." Faith nearly dropped the baby spoon. "What did they find?" She typed back quickly. "James Williams, 29, currently working as a master electrician for Green City Electric. He lives in an apartment on the west side of town. I have his current phone number and address," Thomas replied. Faith stared at the message, her heart pounding. After 3 years of silence, she was just a phone call away from speaking to her brother again. "Should I just call him?" she asked Thomas. "Or would that be too much of a shock?" "What feels right to you?" Thomas replied. "You know your brother better than anyone." Faith thought about it. James had always been straightforward, sometimes to a fault. He had no patience for games or dramatic gestures. "I think I should just call," she decided. "The worst he can do is hang up on me." "That's brave," Thomas texted back. "Would you like me to send his number now?" Faith took a deep breath. "Yes, please." The number appeared in a new message. Faith stared at it, suddenly terrified. What would she say after all this time? How could she explain everything that had happened? "It's James," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Faith?" he repeated, his voice a little deeper than she remembered, but unmistakably him. "Faith," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I've been trying to find you for months." Another silence. Then, "Are you okay? Are you in trouble?" The concern in his voice broke something inside her. After everything she had said to him, his first thought was still for her well-being. I've been better," she admitted. "But I'm getting by." "James, there's so much I need to tell you." "So much has happened," she continued. "Marcus, he's gone. You were right about him. I should have listened." She heard James exhale on the other end of the line. "I didn't want to be right, Faith. Not about that." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry for the things I said. I didn't mean them. I said some things too, James. Things I regret." James replied, "Things I regret too." Faith glanced at Lily. "She's 4 months old. She's beautiful." "James, she has mom's eyes," Faith said, smiling through her tears. "How could you not tell me when she was born?" James asked. "I tried, James. Your number had changed. I've been trying to find you ever since," Faith explained. "I actually texted what I thought was your new number a few weeks ago, but it turned out to be someone else. A stranger who ended up helping me find you." James's voice cracked slightly. "You have a baby?" "Yes," Faith said. "She's beautiful." "James, she has mom's eyes." Faith glanced at Lily, who was watching her with curious eyes from her high chair. "James, there's someone I want you to meet." "Your niece, Lily," she told him. "I'd like that," James said firmly. "And you can come over." Faith looked around her small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was clean and homey. Yes, she said. I'd like that. They arranged for James to visit the following evening. After hanging up, Faith sat down, her legs shaky with relief. She picked up Lily and held her close. You're going to meet your uncle tomorrow, she told her daughter. He's going to love you so much. She texted Thomas. I just spoke to James. He's coming over tomorrow to meet Lily. Thank you, Thomas. I can't believe you found him, she added. I'm so happy for you, Thomas replied. Family reunions are precious. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, Faith admitted. Happy, nervous, grateful all at once. That sounds about right, Thomas wrote back. Take some time to process it all. And remember, you've done something brave today. That's worth celebrating. Faith smiled at his words. In the few weeks since their accidental connection, Thomas had become a steady presence in her life, a voice of calm and encouragement when she needed it most. I have you to thank for this, she texted him. None of this would have happened without you. You texted me, Thomas replied. You reached out. You made the call. Give yourself credit. Faith smiled, touched by his insistence on her agency in all this. Most people in her life had tried to make her feel small or dependent. Thomas did the opposite. Somehow, he managed to help her without diminishing her. She spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation, cleaning the apartment and preparing for James's visit. The next day would bring another chapter in her life. The reunion with her brother, the only family she had left beyond Lily, and it had all started with a wrong number text to a stranger named Thomas Blackwood. Faith paced her small apartment, checking the clock every few minutes. James was due to arrive at 6 o'clock, and it was already 5:55. She had changed Lily into her nicest outfit, a little yellow dress that a co-worker from the hospital had given her as a baby shower gift. She'd spent the morning cleaning, though there wasn't much to clean in the tiny space. She'd even splurged on a small cake from the grocery store, remembering how James had always had a sweet tooth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Thinking of you today. How are you feeling about seeing your brother? Faith smiled, grateful for his thoughtfulness. Nervous, excited, scared, all of the above. What if he judges me for where I'm living? What if he's still angry? She added. Thomas's reply came quickly. Remember, he's coming because he wants to see you. That says a lot already. Before Faith could respond, there was a knock at the door. She froze, her heart pounding, glancing at the clock. 5:52. She realized James was early. That was so like him, always punctual to a fault. With shaking hands, she typed a quick reply to Thomas, then put down her phone and went to answer the door. She paused, took a deep breath, and pulled it open. James stood there, looking both familiar and different. His dark hair was shorter than she remembered, and he'd grown a neat beard. He wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, holding a small gift bag in one hand. His eyes, though, were filled with uncertainty. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then James broke the silence. Faith, he said, his voice thick with emotion. James, she replied, tears welling up in her eyes. And then they were hugging, 3 years of silence and hurt melting away in the warmth of their embrace. Faith felt like she was home for the first time in years, safe in her big brother's arms. I missed you so much, she whispered against his shoulder. I missed you too, little sister, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than you know. When they finally broke apart, Faith wiped tears from her cheeks and stepped back to let him in. Come meet your niece, she said, leading him to where Lily sat in her bouncer. James approached slowly, almost reverently. He knelt down in front of the bouncer, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in the tiny person before him. Hi there, Lily, he said softly. I'm your Uncle James. Lily looked at him with curious eyes, then broke into a toothless smile that made James catch his breath. She has Mom's eyes, he said, looking up at Faith. You were right. Faith nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Their mother had been gone for 7 years now. But in moments like this, it felt like she was still with them. James reached into the gift bag he brought and pulled out a soft stuffed elephant. I got this for her, he said, offering it to Lily, who immediately grabbed it with chubby hands. It's perfect, Faith said, finally finding her voice. Thank you. They moved to the small living area. Faith made coffee while James held Lily, getting acquainted with his niece. There was an easiness between them that Faith hadn't expected, as if the bond that had been strained but never broken was quickly regaining its strength. "So," James said after a while, as Lily played with her new elephant on his lap, "tell me everything. How are you really doing?" Faith sat across from him and took a deep breath. "It's been hard," she admitted. "Really hard. When Marcus left, I was already 3 months pregnant. I had no savings, and then the hospital downsized, and I lost my job right after my maternity leave. For a while, I wasn't sure how we were going to make it." James's face darkened. "That bastard," he muttered. "If I ever see him—" "He's not worth it," Faith interrupted. "Lily and I are better off without him." James nodded, though he still looked angry. "And now? How are you getting by?" "I found a job," Faith said, a small smile forming. "Medical transcription from home. It's perfect with Lily. I can work during her naps and at night." "That's great," James said, looking genuinely pleased. "Why didn't you call me when things got tough? I would have helped." Faith looked down at her coffee. "I tried, James, but your number had changed, and none of our mutual friends seemed to know how to reach you. And honestly, I was ashamed. You warned me about Marcus, and I chose him over you. I said terrible things." James reached across the table and took her hand. "We both said things we regret, but you're my sister, Faith. Nothing changes that." Faith squeezed his hand, fighting back tears. "Again, I know that now. So how did you finally find me?" James asked. Faith laughed, realizing how strange the story would sound. "It's actually kind of crazy. I was desperate one night, out of formula and no money. I thought I had your new number, so I texted asking for help, but it wasn't you. It was this guy named Thomas, and he helped. Not only helped, but he had 6 cans of formula delivered to me that night, and then helped me find this job and found you." James's eyebrows shot up. "Who is this Thomas guy?" "Some kind of saint." Faith smiled, thinking about Thomas and their daily text conversations. "He's just someone with a good heart. He said his mom raised him alone, and there were times when strangers helped them. He was paying it forward. I'd like to meet him someday." James nodded. "Maybe when the time is right." As the evening progressed, Faith cut the cake she'd bought, and they talked about everything that had happened in the 3 years they'd been apart. James had become a master electrician and was now supervising crews on major construction projects. He had dated a few women, but was currently single. He had moved to the west side of the city for work, which explained why Faith hadn't run into him. "What about you?" James asked as they finished their cake. "Anyone special in your life, besides Lily?" Faith shook her head. "Between work and Lily, I barely have time to shower, let alone date. And after Marcus, my trust issues have trust issues." James nodded understandingly. "When you're ready, the right person will come along. Someone who appreciates how amazing you are." Faith smiled, touched by his confidence in her. "Thanks, big brother." As the evening wound down and Lily began to fuss, ready for her bedtime routine, Faith picked her up, soothing her with gentle pats. "I should go," James said, standing. "Let you get her bed. Will you come back?" Faith asked suddenly, anxious. "This isn't just a one-time visit, right?" James looked at her with surprise. "Of course I'm coming back. You're my family. You and Lily." He reached out and stroked Lily's head gently. "How about Sunday? I can bring dinner." Faith nodded, relief washing over her. "Sunday sounds perfect." At the door, James hugged her again, careful not to squish Lily between them. "I'm so glad you found me," he said. "Me too," Faith replied. "More than you know." After James left, Faith put Lily to bed, then sat on her couch, emotionally drained but happier than she had been in years. She picked up her phone to text Thomas. "James just left. It went really well. Better than I could have hoped." Thomas's reply came almost immediately. "I'm so happy for you, Faith. Family is precious." Faith smiled. "Thank you for everything. You've given me back my brother. There's no need to thank me. I'm just glad things worked out. And I'd like to meet you someday." "When the time is right," Thomas replied. Faith wondered what that meant, but was too tired to analyze it. "Thank you again, Thomas. Get some rest. You've had a big day." Thomas put his phone down and turned to the contracts Eleanor had left yesterday. The Eastside development was still the first item on the agenda. Thomas stared at the plans, seeing them with new eyes. What would this development mean for people like Faith for the community that already existed there? He pressed the intercom. "Eleanor, cancel my meetings this afternoon. I want to visit the East Side site personally." "Yes, sir," Eleanor replied, sounding surprised. "And Eleanor, bring my casual clothes from home." 3 hours later, Thomas walked the streets of the East Side neighborhood in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking like any other professional taking a lunch break. He passed small businesses, a laundromat, a corner grocery, a daycare center, all of which would be demolished under the current development plan. He watched people going about their daily lives. Mothers with children, elderly residents sitting on stoops, teenagers walking home from school. This was Faith's world. These were her streets, her community. And his company was planning to erase it all in the name of progress and profit. As he walked, Thomas began to form a new vision, one that incorporated the existing community rather than displacing it. Mixed income housing instead of luxury-only condos. Space for local businesses alongside new retail. A development that lifted the entire community rather than replacing it. By the time he returned to his office, Thomas had the outline of a new proposal for the East Side development. It would make less money initially, but would be more sustainable in the long run, and, more importantly, it would allow people like Faith to remain in their homes and communities. He didn't mention any of this to Faith in their text that evening or during their phone call the following night. This wasn't about impressing her or gaining her approval. It was about doing the right thing. Something she had reminded him was important. Just by being who she was, as their phone calls became a regular part of his evenings, Thomas found himself thinking more and more about meeting Faith in person. But something held him back. Would she see him differently once she knew the full extent of his wealth and power? Would it change the easy friendship they had developed? Or worse, would she think he had ulterior motives for helping her? For now, he was content with their phone calls and texts, with hearing about Lily's latest developments and Faith's growing confidence as both a mother and a professional. But he couldn't help wondering what it would be like to meet them face to face, to see Faith smile, to hold Lily in his arms. What Thomas didn't know was that Faith was wondering the same thing. Lying awake at night after their calls, she imagined what it would be like to meet the man whose voice had become such an important part of her life that a month had passed since Faith and James had reunited. He was now a regular presence in her and Lily's life, coming over for dinner twice a week and often stopping by just to spend time with his niece. With his help, Faith had been able to focus more on her transcription work, which was going well. She had progressed to more complex files and higher pay rates. Her friendship with Thomas had deepened as well. Their nightly phone calls had become a highlight of her day, sometimes lasting for hours as they talked about everything and nothing. Faith had begun to realize that her feelings for Thomas were evolving beyond friendship, though she tried to keep that to herself. After all, they had never even met in person, and Faith was acutely aware of the many responsibilities that came with being a single mother. One evening in late May, Faith sat on her tiny balcony, enjoying the warm spring air while Lily napped inside. Her phone rang with Thomas's familiar number. "Hey," she answered, smiling. "You're calling early today?" Faith said. "I hope that's okay," Thomas said. His voice sounded different, tense perhaps. "Of course," Faith assured him. "Everything all right? You sound stressed." There was a slight pause. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you, Faith. Something important." Faith's heart skipped a beat. Was he sick? Moving away? Had he met someone else? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's about my job," Thomas began. "I haven't been entirely forthcoming about what I do." Faith laughed, relieved. "I figured as much. Working in business is pretty vague. Were you some kind of spy or something?" "Not quite," Thomas said, still serious. "Faith, I'm the CEO and majority owner of Blackwood Industries." Faith went silent, trying to process this information. Of course, she knew Thomas was wealthy. He had purchased 6 cans of formula without hesitation and had connections to find her brother and secure her a job. But the CEO of Blackwood Industries? That meant he wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the richest men in the country. "Faith, are you still there?" Thomas asked after the silence had stretched too long. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm just surprised. I guess though maybe I shouldn't be. I knew you had money, but I didn't realize. Does it change things?" Thomas asked, a note of vulnerability in his voice. Between us, I mean, Faith thought carefully before answering. Did it change things? Thomas was still the same person who had checked on her daily, who had listened to her fears and hopes, who had helped her find her brother. No, she said finally, it doesn't change who you are. But I am curious. Why are you telling me now? Thomas sighed. 2 reasons. First, my company is holding a charity gala next weekend to raise money for single-parent support programs. I'd like you to come as my guest, but I couldn't invite you without you knowing who I really am. And the second reason? She asked. There's going to be an announcement in tomorrow's business section about a new development project. Your neighborhood is involved, and I didn't want you to see my name in the paper and think I'd been deliberately hiding things from you. Faith frowned. A development project? What kind of development? It's called the East Side Community Initiative, Thomas explained. It's a mixed-income housing and small business development. The current residents will have the option to stay in upgraded apartments at their current rent rates or to receive relocation assistance if they prefer to move. Am I building 1225 Pine Street? Faith asked. Blackwood Industries purchased it last week, Thomas said. The current management company has been terminated. Renovations begin next month, but no one will be displaced during the process. Faith stood up, pacing the small balcony. Thomas had done an incredible thing for her community, but it was such a dramatic display of wealth and power that it made her question the balance in their relationship. This is a lot to take in, she said finally. I understand, Thomas replied. And about the gala, you don't have to come. I just wanted to give you the option. Faith bit her lip. Can I think about it? The gala, I mean, of course, Thomas said quickly. It's next Saturday evening. Very formal. I'm afraid, but I would handle all the details, dress, transportation, everything. Let me help. I need to sleep on it, Faith said. And Thomas, thank you for telling me the truth. After they hung up, Faith sat for a long time, thinking about everything Thomas had revealed. The man she had been talking to for months was not just a successful businessman, but one of the most powerful people in the city. He could buy buildings on a whim, reshape entire neighborhoods, and he wanted her to attend a charity gala with him. Faith went inside to check on Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully. Looking at her daughter, Faith thought about what this could mean for their future. Thomas had already changed their lives in so many ways. The formula delivery, the job connection, finding James. But going to this gala would be crossing a line, moving their relationship from the safe space of phone calls and texts into the real world. Was she ready for that? And more importantly, what would it mean for Lily? Faith called James, needing her brother's perspective. He's who, James exclaimed when Faith explained Thomas Blackwood was the Thomas Blackwood. Apparently, Faith said, and he wants me to go to some fancy charity gala with him next weekend. Are you going to go? Faith sighed. I don't know. What do you think? James was quiet for a moment. I think you should go, he said finally. But be careful. Men like that, they live in a different world. Faith smiled softly. That's what scares me. Want me to watch Lily that night? James offered. She can have her first sleepover at Uncle James's place. Faith said, grateful for her brother's support. Let me decide if I'm going first, but thank you, James, she replied. After hanging up, Faith looked around her small apartment, seeing it through new eyes. The eyes of someone who knew the building's owner was Thomas Blackwood. Would there be renovations soon? Better heating? New appliances? It was all so surreal. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. I hope I didn't overwhelm you with everything. Whatever you decide about the gala, nothing changes between us unless you want it to. Faith smiled at his thoughtfulness. Not overwhelmed, she texted back, not entirely truthfully, just processing. And I've decided to come to the gala. But I'll need help with a dress and a babysitter. Thomas's reply came quickly. I'm so glad. I'll handle the dress. Would you be comfortable with me sending a stylist to you? As for the babysitter, is there someone you trust? My brother offered to take Lily for the night. Faith replied, a stylist would be fine. I've never been to anything like this before. You'll be wonderful, Thomas assured her. And Faith, thank you for giving me a chance to meet you in person. I've been wanting to for a long time. Faith felt butterflies in her stomach as she read his words. I've wanted to meet you too, she admitted, though I'm a little nervous. Me too, came his surprising reply. More than a little, actually. The knowledge that Thomas Blackwood, billionaire CEO, was nervous about meeting her made Faith smile. Maybe they weren't so different after all. The next day, the business section of the city newspaper featured a front-page story about the East Side Community Initiative. There was a photo of Thomas, the first time Faith had seen what he looked like, standing in front of a model of the development. He was taller than she had imagined, with dark hair graying at the temples and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He looked both powerful and approachable in his perfectly tailored suit, as promised. A stylist arrived at Faith's apartment 2 days later. A friendly woman named Claudia, who brought a selection of gowns for Faith to try on. They settled on a deep blue dress that made Faith's eyes stand out and complemented her figure without being too revealing. "Mr. Blackwood has excellent taste," Claudia commented as Faith twirled in front of the mirror. "This color is perfect for you." Faith blushed, wondering how Thomas had known to choose this particular shade of blue. Had she mentioned once that it was her favorite color? She couldn't remember, but it wouldn't surprise her if he had remembered such a detail. The night of the gala arrived faster than Faith had expected. James came to pick up Lily, bringing a new stuffed animal for his niece and giving Faith a supportive hug. "You look beautiful," he told her. "This Blackwood guy won't know what hit him." Faith smiled nervously. "Thanks for taking Lily. Call me if anything happens." "No problem," James said. "She'll be fine. You focus on enjoying yourself for once." After they left, Faith finished getting ready, following Claudia's instructions for her hair and makeup. At exactly 7 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "The car is downstairs. Whenever you're ready. No ruse." Faith took one last look in the mirror, barely recognizing the elegant woman who stared back at her. With a deep breath, she gathered her small clutch purse, the wrap that had come with the dress, and headed downstairs. A sleek black car waited at the curb. A chauffeur held the door open for her. "Good evening, Miss Williams," he said politely. "I am Robert. Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you at the venue." The drive to the hotel, where the gala was being held, took about 20 minutes. Faith spent it trying to calm her nerves, reminding herself that she already knew Thomas, even if they had never met in person. This was just putting a face to the voice she had come to care for so deeply. When they arrived, Robert escorted her into the hotel and through the lobby to a private elevator. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting upstairs," he explained. "He thought you might prefer to meet without the crowd around." Faith nodded gratefully, smoothing her dress as the elevator ascended. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a small, elegantly appointed room with windows overlooking the city. And there, standing by the window, was Thomas Blackwood. He turned as she entered, and Faith's breath caught. The man from the newspaper photo was even more handsome in person. His dark suit was custom-fitted to his tall frame. His eyes were warm as they met hers. "Faith," he said, his familiar voice washing over her. "You look beautiful." Faith smiled, her nerves suddenly melting away. "I'm going to finally meet you in person," she said, stepping forward to greet him. Thomas took her hand in both of his touch gentle but secure. "I've been looking forward to this for so long," he admitted. "Though I have to confess, I'm a bit nervous." Faith laughed. "You, the billionaire CEO, nervous about meeting me?" Thomas smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling just as they had in the photo. "The billionaire CEO part isn't who I am when I'm talking to you," he said softly. "With you, I'm just Thomas." And yes, Thomas is very nervous about meeting the woman who has become so important to him. Faith felt a blush rising to her cheeks. She was nervous too, she admitted, but also very happy to be there. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Faith felt something shift between them, a recognition that whatever was happening here was more than friendship, more than gratitude, more than coincidence. "Shall we join the party?" Thomas finally asked, offering his arm. Faith took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her hand. "Lead the way," she said, as they walked toward the elevator that would take them down to the gala. Faith wondered what the evening would bring. She was still Faith Williams, single mother and medical transcriptionist. Thomas was still Thomas Blackwood, billionaire CEO. But somehow, none of those labels seemed to matter as much as the connection they had built, message by message, call by call, over the past months. And as they descended to join the crowd below, Faith felt for the first time in years, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, while elegant floral arrangements adorned every table. A small orchestra played soft music in the corner, providing a pleasant backdrop to the buzz of conversation from the hundreds of guests in formal attire. Faith held tightly to Thomas's arm as they paused at the top of the grand staircase that led down to the ballroom. Every eye seemed to turn toward them, or more specifically, toward Thomas. "Ready?" he asked quietly, placing his hand over hers on his arm. "Just remember, you belong here as much as anyone," Thomas said. Faith took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready?" They descended the staircase together. Faith focused on not tripping in her unfamiliar heels. As they reached the bottom, a tall woman in a sleek black dress approached them. Her smile was professional but warm. "Thomas, there you are," she said. "The senator was asking for you." Thomas introduced Faith. "This is Eleanor Martinez, my chief of staff and the person who really runs Blackwood Industries." Eleanor's smile turned genuine as she offered her hand to Faith. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Faith. I've heard a lot about you." Faith shook her hand, surprised. "You have?" Eleanor glanced at Thomas with an amused expression. "More than a lot, actually." Thomas cleared his throat. "Eleanor, could you please tell the senator I'll speak with him later? I'd like to introduce Faith to some people first." "Of course," Eleanor said. "Enjoy your evening, Faith. I hope we'll have a chance to talk more." As Eleanor moved away, Faith turned to Thomas with raised eyebrows. "You talked about me at work?" Thomas had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Eleanor knows everything about my life. It's part of her job. And yes, I may have mentioned you once or twice, or more than that, according to her." Faith teased. "You talked about me at work?" Thomas smiled, relaxing a little. "Let's just say you've been on my mind a lot these past few months." Before Faith could respond, they were approached by an older couple, and Thomas switched smoothly into host mode. "Judge and Mrs. Watkins, how lovely to see you. May I introduce Faith Williams?" The next hour passed in a blur of introductions. Faith met city council members, hospital administrators, university deans, and business leaders. Thomas kept her at his side the entire time, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. He introduced her simply as Faith Williams, offering no explanation for her presence, which both relieved and puzzled her. A waiter offered them champagne, and Faith accepted gratefully, taking a sip to calm her nerves. "You're doing wonderfully," Thomas murmured as they had a moment to themselves. "How are you feeling?" "A bit overwhelmed," Faith admitted. "Everyone keeps looking at me like they're trying to figure out who I am and why I'm here." "They're looking at you because you're beautiful," Thomas said simply, "and because they're not used to seeing me with a date at these functions. I usually attend alone." Faith felt her cheeks warm at being called his date, though she supposed that's what she was. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "You could have anyone here. Why did you invite me?" Thomas looked at her seriously. "Because you're the only person I wanted to be with tonight. The only person I've wanted to be with for quite some time now." The intensity in his eyes made Faith's heart skip a beat. Before she could respond, the orchestra finished their piece, and a man approached the microphone on the small stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please take your seats, dinner is about to be served." Thomas led Faith to the head table, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. As they sat, Faith noticed several curious glances directed their way from the other guests at the table, clearly important people based on their confident demeanor and expensive clothing. The first course was served, a delicate salad with ingredients Faith couldn't identify, and conversation flowed around the table. Thomas made sure to include Faith, explaining inside references and introducing topics she could comment on. His thoughtfulness touched her, as did the way he listened intently whenever she spoke, as if her opinions on city education initiatives or healthcare access were as valuable as those of the university president seated across from them. Between the main course and dessert, Thomas excused himself briefly to speak with the senator that Eleanor had mentioned earlier. The woman seated next to Faith, the wife of a hospital board member, leaned over immediately. "So how did you and Thomas meet?" she asked, her tone friendly, but her eyes sharp with curiosity. Faith smiled, deciding on the truth, or at least part of it. "Through a wrong number," she said. Thomas replied to a text I had intended for someone else, and we started talking and connected. The woman looked surprised, then charmed by the unusual story. "How serendipitous," she said. "And what do you do, dear?" "I'm a medical transcriptionist," Faith said, "and a mother. My daughter, Lily, is 5 months old." "Working mother. How admirable," the woman said. "And the father?" Faith tensed slightly. "Not in the picture." The woman's expression shifted subtly, and Faith could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. "Single mother, probably not wealthy, definitely not from our social circle." "How nice of Thomas to include you in tonight's event," she said, her tone slightly different now. "He's always been so generous with his charitable efforts," Faith said, her cheeks warming at the implication that she was a charity case. Thomas returned, slipping into his chair beside her. "Mrs. Porter," he said pleasantly to the woman, "I see you've been getting to know Faith." "Yes, she was just telling me about your unusual meeting," Mrs. Porter replied. "So charming." Thomas smiled, but Faith noticed a coolness in his eyes as he regarded the woman. "Isn't it?" he said. "I've always believed the best things in life happen unexpectedly." He turned to Faith, his expression warming. "The senator sends his apologies for pulling me away. He's very interested in our East Side initiative." Faith smiled, grateful for his return and his subtle support. "It sounds like an amazing project," she said. "It was inspired by you," Thomas said quietly. "Meeting you made me rethink a lot of things about development and community." Faith felt a rush of emotion. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, and the man with the microphone returned to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the highlight of our evening. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Blackwood Industries, the chairman of tonight's gala, Mr. Thomas Blackwood." Applause filled the room as Thomas squeezed Faith's hand and stood. "Wish me luck," he murmured. "Good luck," she whispered back, watching as he made his way to the stage. Thomas took the microphone with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to public speaking. "Thank you all for coming tonight in support of the Blackwood Foundation's Single Parent Support Initiative. As many of you know, this cause is particularly close to my heart. My own mother raised me alone, working multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table." Faith listened, captivated. Thomas had mentioned his mother briefly in their conversations, but he'd never gone into detail about his childhood. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Blackwood Industries will be donating $50 million to establish a new program providing housing, childcare, education, and job training for single parents in our city. Gasps and applause greeted this announcement. $50 million was far more than anyone had expected, even from a man as wealthy as Thomas Blackwood. This initiative will focus particularly on creating opportunities for economic independence, Thomas continued. "Because as I've learned recently, what single parents need most isn't handouts. It's a chance to build security and stability for their families through their own efforts." His eyes found Faith in the crowd, and she felt a rush of emotion. "Every parent deserves the opportunity to provide for their children with dignity," Thomas said, his gaze still on Faith. "And every child deserves to grow up knowing they are valued and supported by their community." The applause was thunderous as Thomas returned to his seat. Under the table, Faith reached for his hand and squeezed it tightly. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "I meant every word," he replied, squeezing back. After dinner, the orchestra began playing again, and couples moved to the dance floor. Thomas turned to Faith. "Would you dance with me?" he asked. Faith hesitated. "I'm not very good. It's been a long time." "I'm not either," Thomas admitted. "But I'd really like to hold you in my arms, if that's okay." His honesty made Faith's heart flutter. When you put it that way, how could she say no? On the dance floor, Thomas drew her close, one hand to the small of her back, the other holding hers against his chest. They swayed gently to the music, not attempting anything more complicated. "Thank you for coming tonight," Thomas said softly. "Seeing you here, meeting you in person after all these months, it's even better than I imagined." Faith looked up at him, struck by the warmth and openness in his eyes. "I've been wondering something," she said. Why didn't you just tell me who you were from the beginning? Why keep it a secret for so long? Thomas sighed. I've asked myself that same question. At first, it was just that it didn't seem relevant to a one-time interaction with a wrong number. Then, as we started talking more, I realized how much I enjoyed just being Thomas to you. Not Thomas Blackwood CEO, with all the expectations and assumptions that come with that title. You thought I'd treat you differently if I knew. Faith asked. Most people do, Thomas said simply. They either want something from me or they're intimidated by me. With you, our connection felt pure real. I was afraid of losing that. Faith considered his words, understanding his fear. I can see why you'd worry. But Thomas, the man I've come to know through all those texts and calls, that's who you really are. The money, the company, this gala, that's just the packaging. Thomas looked at her with wonder. How did you get so wise? Faith laughed. Believe me, I've made plenty of unwise choices in my life. Just ask my brother. Speaking of James, Thomas said, how is he doing with Lily tonight? He's texted twice with photos, Faith said, smiling. They're doing great. He's completely smitten with her. I can understand that, Thomas said. I haven't even met her yet, and I'm already half in love with her from your stories. The phrase half in love hung in the air between them. Both acknowledging and not acknowledging its implications, they continued dancing, falling into comfortable silence. Faith rested her head against Thomas's shoulder, breathing in his subtle cologne and feeling the solid strength of him. For these few minutes, she allowed herself to forget the differences between them, the wealth gap, their different worlds, the complications that would inevitably arise. As the song ended, Thomas looked down at her, his expression serious. Faith, there's something I need to tell you, he said. What is it? She asked, feeling a flutter of anxiety. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know it's fast, and I know there are 1,000 reasons why it's complicated, but I wanted you to know. Faith stared at him, speechless. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this wasn't it. Yet as the words sank in, she realized part of her had known all along that their connection was heading in this direction. You don't have to say anything, Thomas added quickly. I understand if you don't feel the same way or if you need time. Faith reached up and placed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping his words. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And you're right, it is complicated, but it's also real. Thomas's eyes lit up with joy and relief. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Faith responded, her hands sliding up to his cheek as she kissed him back. It was sweet and tender, a promise of something more rather than a demand. When they broke apart, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. What happens now? He asked softly. Now we figure out, one day at a time, together, Faith replied. Around them, the gala continued. People danced, laughed, networked, and fundraising. But for Faith and Thomas, the world had narrowed to just the two of them standing in the center of the dance floor, embarking on a journey neither had expected when Faith sent that desperate text message 3 months ago. The morning after the gala, Faith woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She smiled when she saw Thomas's name on the screen. Good morning, she answered, her voice still husky with sleep. Good morning, Thomas replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I hope I didn't wake you. It's fine, Faith said, sitting up in bed. I need to get up anyway. James is bringing Lily home at 9 o'clock. That's actually why I'm calling, Thomas said. I was wondering if it would be okay if I came with you to pick up Lily. I'd really like to meet her. Faith's heart skipped a beat. This was a big step, introducing Thomas to her daughter. But after last night, after his confession and their kiss, it felt right. I'd like that, she said. But fair warning, my apartment looks very different from that hotel ballroom. Thomas chuckled. I'm looking forward to seeing where you live. What time should I come by? Thomas asked. They arranged for Thomas to pick her up at 8:30. After hanging up, Faith rushed around her small apartment, cleaning and tidying as best she could. The place was shabby but clean, with secondhand furniture and a few touches that made it home. Photos of Lily, a colorful quilt Faith's mother had made, a small bookshelf filled with well-worn favorites, a tea precisely 8:30. There was a knock at her door. Faith took a deep breath, smoothing her simple sundress, and opened it. Thomas stood there in casual clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking both different from and the same as the elegant man in a tuxedo from the night before. He held a small bouquet of daisies and a gift bag. "Hi," he said, suddenly looking shy. "These are for you." Faith took the flowers with a smile. "Thank you. They're beautiful." "Combien?" Thomas stepped inside, glancing around with interest but no judgment. "Your home is lovely," he said. "It's small, but it works for us," Faith said, putting the flowers in a jar of water. "What's in the bag?" "Just a little something for Lily," Thomas said, placing it on the coffee table. "Nothing expensive," he added quickly, seeming to sense her potential discomfort. "Just a little stuffed elephant I saw in a shop window on my way here. It reminded me of the one you mentioned James gave her." Faith smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very sweet," she said. "She loves elephants." They drove to James's apartment in Thomas's car. Not a flashy sports car, Faith noted with approval, but a comfortable high-end sedan. Thomas drove himself rather than using a chauffeur. "Another point in his favor, in the car," Faith asked, noticing his fingers tapping on the steering wheel. "Nervous?" Thomas admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Terrified. What if she doesn't like me? She's 5 months old." Faith reminded him with a laugh. "She likes anyone who smiles at her and doesn't make sudden loud noises." "Still," Thomas insisted, "babies have good instincts about people. I want to make a good impression." Faith reached over and placed her hand on his arm. "Just be yourself. The real Thomas. The one who texted with me all those months. That's who I fell for, and that's who Lily will love too." Thomas glanced at her, his eyes warm. "Fell for, huh?" Faith blushed. "You know what I mean." They arrived at James's apartment building. Nicer than Faith's, but still modest. Thomas followed Faith up to the 3rd floor, standing slightly behind her as she knocked on James's door. James opened it, Lily on his hip. "Hey, sis," he said, perfect timing. Someone just woke up from her nap. James noticed Thomas. "Oh, hello. This is Thomas," Faith said, reaching for Lily, who immediately stretched her arms toward her mother. "Thomas, my brother James, and my daughter Lily," she introduced. James shook Thomas's hand, eyeing him with the protective look of an older brother. "Nice to meet you," he said. "Likewise," Thomas replied, "though I feel like I'm at a disadvantage. Faith only told me who you really are a few days ago." James seemed to approve of this response. "Why don't you both come in for a few minutes? I just made coffee." Inside James's apartment, Faith sat on the couch with Lily on her lap. Thomas sat beside them, watching Lily with a mixture of fascination and nervousness. "She looks just like you," he said to Faith. "She has your eyes." Faith smiled. "Everyone says that, but she has her own personality, doesn't she, Lily Bug?" As if on cue, Lily turned her curious gaze to Thomas, studying him with the intense focus that babies sometimes have. Then, to everyone's surprise, she leaned toward him, reaching out a chubby hand. "I think she wants you to hold her," Faith said, surprised. Lily wasn't usually this immediately comfortable with strangers. Thomas looked panicked. I don't know how. I haven't held many babies." "It's easy," Faith assured him. "Just support her head and back here." She carefully transferred Lily to Thomas's arms. He held her stiffly at first, clearly terrified of doing something wrong. But Lily seemed perfectly content, reaching up to pat his cheek with her small hand. "Hello, Lily," Thomas said softly. "It's very nice to finally meet you." Lily gurgled in response, then broke into a gummy smile that made Thomas's face light up with wonder. "She smiled at me," he said, looking at Faith with amazement. "She likes you," Faith confirmed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at the sight of them together. From the kitchen doorway, James watched the interaction with a thoughtful expression. When Faith went to help him with the coffee, he spoke quietly. "He seems like a good guy, despite the whole billionaire thing." Faith smiled. "He is. He's kind and thoughtful, and he sees me, James, not just as a single mom or someone who needs help, but as a person." James nodded. "I can tell the way he looks at you. It's the real deal." Faith felt a flutter of happiness at her brother's approval. When they returned to the living room, they found Thomas completely at ease with Lily, bouncing her gently on his knee while she giggled with delight. I almost forgot, Thomas said. I brought something for Lily. He reached for the gift bag he had carried in and pulled out a small, soft elephant toy, offering it to Lily. Lily grabbed it immediately, examining it with serious concentration before hugging it to her chest. I think that's a hit, James commented. The elephant family grows, Faith said with a smile. She'll need a bigger crib soon to fit them all. After coffee and conversation, during which James subtly but thoroughly questioned Thomas about his intentions toward Faith and Lily, they prepared to leave. As they were saying goodbye, James pulled Faith aside for a moment. He passed the test, he said quietly. But be careful, Faith. Not because he's rich, but because I can tell you're falling hard. Just take it slow, okay? Faith hugged her brother. I will. Thank you for watching Lily last night. Anytime, James said. She's the best niece in the world. In the car on the way back to Faith's apartment, Thomas was unusually quiet. Faith glanced at him, wondering what he was thinking. Everything okay? She asked finally. Thomas nodded, then shook his head. Just seeing you with Lily, meeting James, being in your world, it made everything real in a way it wasn't before. Faith's heart sank. Is that a problem? No, Thomas said quickly, reaching for her hand. Just the opposite. It made me realize how much I want to be part of your lives, both of you. But I also realize what a big ask that is. You're a package deal, Faith, and that's exactly as it should be. Lily will always come first for you. Faith squeezed his hand, deeply moved by his consideration for Lily's emotional well-being. That's very true, she said. So what are you saying? Thomas pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. I'm saying that I want to do this right. I want to date you properly, get to know you better in person, not just through texts and calls. I want to spend time with both of you, become a part of your lives gradually. And if things continue to develop between us the way I hope they will, well, we'll take that step when we come to it. Faith looked at him, seeing the sincerity and care in his eyes. This wasn't the whirlwind romance of fairy tales, but something better, a thoughtful, mature approach to building a relationship that acknowledged the realities of their situation. I'd like that, she said softly. And I think Lily would too. She already seems quite taken with you. Thomas smiled, his relief evident. The feeling is entirely mutual. She's extraordinary, just like her mother. He leaned across the console and kissed Faith gently, a promise of more to come, but with no pressure for immediate fulfillment. Yes, they drove back to Faith's apartment, Lily babbling happily in her car seat, and her new elephant clutched tightly in her small hand. Faith felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. There were still challenges ahead. The differences in their backgrounds, the scrutiny their relationship would face, the adjustments they would both need to make. But for the first time, Faith believed that those challenges wouldn't be faced alone. In the back seat, Lily dropped her elephant, and Thomas reached back to retrieve it for her, earning another delighted smile from the baby. Watching them, Faith thought about how a single text message to a wrong number had changed the course of her life, bringing her brother back, giving her financial stability, and now potentially a partner who saw her for who she truly was. Sometimes, she realized, the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. 1 year later, Faith stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at her. Her hair was styled in loose waves, her makeup subtle but enhancing. The dress she wore was ivory silk, simple but elegant, falling to just below her knees. Around her neck was a delicate silver pendant, a gift from Thomas on their 6-month anniversary. You look beautiful, sis, James said from the doorway. Thomas is going to be speechless. Faith smiled nervously. I hope so. Where's Lily? In the living room with Eleanor. That woman is surprisingly good with kids for someone who runs a billion-dollar company, Faith laughed. Over the past year, Eleanor had become a dear friend. Her efficiency and dry humor were a perfect complement to Faith's more emotional nature. Faith followed James into the living room of the penthouse apartment they now called home. It wasn't Thomas's place. They had chosen it together 6 months ago when Faith's lease ended. Thomas had insisted that Faith's name be on the deed alongside his, making it truly their home, not just a space where she and Lily lived. Eleanor sat on the floor, her usual professional demeanor softened as she helped Lily stack blocks. The toddler looked adorable in her white and pale blue dress, a small flower crown perched on her dark curls. "Mama pretty?" Lily announced when she saw Faith, abandoning her blocks to toddle over. Faith scooped her up, careful not to wrinkle either of their outfits. "Thank you, baby. You look pretty too." Eleanor stood, brushing off her tailored pants. "She's right. You look stunning, Faith. Thank you for handling everything. I don't know what we'd do without you." Eleanor's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine affection. "It's my pleasure. Seeing Thomas this happy, it's worth all the extra work." The past year had brought changes neither Faith nor Thomas could have imagined when they first met at the charity gala. Their relationship had developed naturally, with Thomas becoming a regular presence in Faith and Lily's lives. He had kept his promise to take things slowly, always respecting Faith's role as Lily's mother and never attempting to rush or pressure her. 3 months after the gala, Faith had been promoted to team leader at MedScript transcription, a role she had earned through her excellent work and attention to detail. Thomas had been more proud of her than she was of herself, insisting on taking her out to celebrate. 4 months after that, when Faith's lease was up for renewal, Thomas had suggested they find a place together. Faith had been hesitant at first, worried about moving too quickly, but the penthouse they found, with its separate bedrooms for each of them, a perfect nursery for Lily and a home office for Faith, had felt right from the moment they saw it. James had moved to a comfortable apartment in the same building, able to be close to his sister and niece while still maintaining his independence. His electrical contracting business had expanded after Thomas recommended him for several Blackwood Industries projects. Though James had insisted on earning each contract through the quality of his work, not his connection to the boss, and 5 months ago, on Lily's first birthday, Thomas had proposed, not with a grand gesture or public display, but quietly at home after Lily had gone to sleep. He had presented Faith with a simple but exquisite diamond ring and told her that the wrong number text that had brought them together was the luckiest mistake of his life. Faith had said yes without hesitation. They had decided on a small wedding, just family and close friends, in the garden of their building. No press, no business associates, no elaborate celebration. Just a genuine expression of their commitment to each other and to the family they were building together. The elevator chimed, announcing an arrival. Faith's heart raced, thinking it might be Thomas, but instead, an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked dark hair stepped into the penthouse. "Mrs. Blackwood," Eleanor greeted her. "Welcome, Eleanor," she said with a warm smile. "How many times must I tell you to call me Margaret?" Thomas's mother said, stepping forward. She turned to Faith and her smile widened. "Faith, my dear, you look absolutely radiant." Faith embraced her future mother-in-law. Margaret Blackwood had been a surprise in many ways. Warm, down to earth, and completely without pretension, despite her son's wealth. She had welcomed Faith and Lily into her life with open arms, telling Faith privately that she had never seen Thomas so happy and at peace. "Gamma!" Lily exclaimed, reaching for Margaret. Margaret took the toddler with practiced ease. "Hello, my little treasure. Are you ready for the big day?" "Cake," Lily replied enthusiastically, making everyone laugh. "She has her priorities straight," James commented. The elevator chimed again, and this time it was Thomas who stepped into the penthouse. He wore a light gray suit with a pale blue tie that matched the flowers in Lily's crown. His eyes found Faith immediately, and the love in his gaze made her breath catch. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the wedding," Faith teased, though they had agreed not to be too traditional about such things. "I couldn't stay away," Thomas said, crossing to her and taking her hands in his. "You look absolutely beautiful." Faith smiled up at him. "You don't look so bad yourself." Thomas bent to kiss her, but James cleared his throat dramatically. "Save it for the ceremony, you too," he said with a grin. Thomas laughed, then turned to scoop Lily from his mother's arms. "How's my favorite girl? Ready to help Daddy and Mama get married?" "Cake," Lily repeated, her main concern for the day. After the ceremony, Thomas promised, "Remember what we practiced? You walk down the aisle with Uncle James and throw the flower petals." Lily nodded solemnly, though Faith suspected the details would be forgotten in the excitement of the moment. "It's almost time," Eleanor announced. "We should head downstairs." Faith felt a flutter of nerves as they rode the elevator down to the building's private garden. She had never imagined herself here, in love with a billionaire, about to be married in a fairy tale ceremony. Yet it didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt real and right and somehow inevitable, as if all the hardships she had faced had been leading her to this moment. In the garden, their small group of guests waited. Mariah from MedScript, some of Faith's colleagues, a few of Thomas's closest friends, the staff from their building who had become like family. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. James walked Faith down the aisle, followed by Lily, who did indeed forget to throw her flower petals until the very end, when she dumped the entire basket in one spot. Thomas waited under an arch of white roses and blue hydrangeas, his eyes never leaving Faith as she approached. They had written their own vows, promises not of perfect romance, but of partnership, respect, and unwavering support. Faith's heart raced as she looked at Thomas, her Thomas. She had never imagined herself here, in love with a billionaire, about to be married in a fairy tale ceremony. It didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt real and right and somehow inevitable, as if all the hardships she had faced had been leading her to this moment. She took a deep breath and began her vows. "Thomas, I texted you in my darkest moment, never expecting that a stranger would become my greatest blessing. You saw me when I felt invisible, believed in me when I doubted myself, and loved me exactly as I am. I promise to face whatever challenges come our way together, to remind you of your worth beyond your success, to create a home filled with love and laughter, and to be grateful every day for the wrong number that led me to you." Tears streamed down her face as she finished. Thomas's eyes were bright with emotion as he began his vows. "Faith, when you texted me by accident that night asking for help for your daughter, you changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You reminded me what truly matters, showed me what real strength looks like, and brought joy and purpose back into my days. I promise to stand beside you always, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, to be a partner in raising Lily, and to never take for granted the miracle that brought you into my life." As they exchanged simple gold bands, Faith felt a profound sense of connection and promise. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her with a tenderness that held the promise of their future together. The small reception that followed, Faith found herself standing slightly apart, watching as Thomas danced with Lily. The toddler stood on his shoes and giggled as he guided her around the floor. James approached, handing Faith a glass of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts, sis?" he asked. Faith smiled, accepting glass. "I was just thinking about that night, the night I texted Thomas by mistake. I was so desperate, so scared. I thought I was testing you, seeing if you still care enough to help me. But maybe it wasn't a mistake at all." James followed her gaze to Thomas and Lily. "Maybe it was exactly where that message was supposed to go," he said. "I still can't believe where we are now," Faith admitted. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it must be a dream." "You deserve this happiness," James said seriously. "Both of you do." Thomas approached with Lily, who was starting to look tired after all the excitement. "I think someone's ready for a nap," he said, passing the drowsy toddler to Faith. "I'll take her upstairs," James offered. "You two should enjoy your reception." After James left with Lily, Thomas led Faith to the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. As they swayed to the music, Thomas held her close, his cheek resting against her hair. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," Faith replied honestly. "You completely transformed my world," Thomas said. "You brought humanity back to my work, reminded me of what truly matters." Faith rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I never thank you for answering a wrong number text at 2 a.m., she whispered. "For not dismissing me as a stranger, for seeing me as a person worth helping." Thomas tilted her chin up gently, his eyes full of love. "You never needed to thank me for that. Every day, I'm the one who's grateful that you reached out, even if it was by accident. Best mistake I ever made." Faith whispered, "Best wrong number anyone ever dialed." Thomas agreed, bending to kiss her softly as the reception continued around them. Faith thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate text message sent at 2:13 a.m. to this moment, husband and wife, partners, family. There had been challenges along the way, of course. Thomas's world of wealth and privilege had taken some getting used to. There had been raised eyebrows and gossip when their relationship became public. Some people had assumed Faith was a gold digger, others that Thomas was experiencing some kind of midlife crisis. But they had faced it all together, strengthened by the genuine connection that had formed through all those late-night texts and phone calls, before wealth or status had entered the equation. They had built their relationship on a foundation of trust, respect, and genuine care for each other. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and Lily was tucked into bed, Faith and Thomas stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out at the city lights. Thomas wrapped his arms around Faith from behind, and she leaned into his embrace. "I have a surprise for you," he murmured against her hair. "Another one?" Faith asked with a smile. "The wedding was perfect. Thomas, I don't need anything else." "This isn't a thing," Thomas said. "It's news. The East Side Community Initiative is complete. All the renovations, all the businesses, everything, and it's working better than we projected. Families are staying in the neighborhood. Local businesses are thriving, and the mixed income model is creating real community." Faith turned in his arms to face him. "That's wonderful news. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished there." Thomas shook his head. "What we've accomplished? It was your influence that changed the entire concept." Faith raised an eyebrow. "By accidentally texting you about baby formula? By reminding you that behind every statistic, every demographic study, every market analysis, there are real people with real lives and dreams." Thomas said seriously, "You brought humanity back to my work, Faith. That's a gift I can never repay." Faith stretched up to kiss him. "You don't need to repay anything. Just keep remembering that lesson. Use your position to make a difference. That's all I ask." Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. "I promise. And speaking of making a difference, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. I'd like to establish a scholarship program for single parents. Full tuition and a living stipend for those who want to go back to school and finish their degrees. I was thinking we could call it the Lily Scholarship." Faith's eyes widened. "Thomas, that's amazing. So many people could benefit from that. I thought maybe you might want to lead it," Thomas suggested. "You understand the challenges single parents face better than anyone I know, and you've proven your leadership skills at MedScript. This could be something that's truly yours, not connected to me or my company." Faith considered the idea, excitement building inside her. She loved her work at MedScript, but this opportunity to help others in situations similar to her own was deeply appealing. "I'd like that," she said finally. "I'd like that very much." Thomas smiled, clearly pleased. "We can start working on the details tomorrow, or next week, after our honeymoon." "Our honeymoon," Faith repeated, still getting used to the idea. They were leaving the next day for 2 weeks in a private villa on a small Caribbean island, with Lily staying with James and Margaret, taking turns to care for her. "Second thoughts?" Thomas asked, catching her hesitation. Faith shook her head. "No second thoughts about marrying you. Just the usual mom anxiety about leaving Lily. But I know she'll be fine with James and your mother." "More than fine," Thomas assured her, thoroughly spoiled, in fact. "And we'll video chat with her every day," Faith said, leaning into his embrace again. "I know it's just this. All still feels like a dream sometimes, the kind you're afraid to wake up from." "Not a dream," Thomas murmured, his arms tightening around her. "And if it is, we're both having the same one, and I don't ever want to wake up." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city below. Finally, Faith spoke the thought that had been on her mind all day. "Do you think it was really an accident, my texting you that night?" Thomas considered the question seriously. "I don't know. I'm not usually one for fate or destiny. I believe in choices and consequences. But the odds of your text reaching someone not only willing to help, but in a position to do so, and then for us to connect the way we did." He shook his head. "It does make you wonder. James called a wrong number, but the right person," Faith said with a smile. "I like that," Thomas replied. "Whether it was chance or fate or something in between, I'm grateful every day that your message came to me, that I answered, that we found each other. Faith turned in his arms again, looking up at the man who had gone from stranger to friend to the love of her life, all because of a text message sent in desperation. I'm grateful, too, for everything that's happened since that night, the good and the difficult. It all led us here. And here's exactly where I want to be, Thomas said, bending to kiss her once more. Inside the penthouse, on a small table in the entryway, Faith's phone lit up with a text message. It was from James, just checking that Lily was sleeping well. Such a simple thing. A text message, yet it had the power to change lives, to connect people, to begin stories that no one could have predicted. Faith Williams Blackwood, once a desperate single mother with nothing but faith and determination, now stood in the arms of her husband, secure in the knowledge that she was loved for exactly who she was. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully in her room. Her brother was back in her life, and her future held promises of both personal happiness and the chance to help others find their way out of difficult circumstances. All because of a wrong number, all because of a text sent at 2:13 a.m. to a stranger who chose to answer. All because two people from vastly different worlds recognized something in each other that transcended circumstance. A shared humanity, a capacity for kindness, a willingness to see beyond assumptions and expectations. "Shall we go inside?" Thomas asked softly. "It's getting chilly." Faith nodded, taking his hand as they walked back into their home. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to grow together. But for tonight, it was enough to be here, to be together, to be a family, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and love, and the serendipity of a message sent to the wrong number, but somehow finding exactly the right person.